a big hello and welcome to my show Unbound. I'm your host Mamta, a space curated for real stories of people from different walks of life who have sailed through uncharted waters and lived to tell their inspiring story. Unbound is a deep dive into their journeys to unravel, unearth, uncover various facets of their lives as they remain unstoppable and continue to do the unthinkable. As they open up about their life with me, I'm sure you will find nuggets of wisdom to live unbound too. So let's unbound together. Moving from logistics, transport, warehousing, storage, vendor management to social entrepreneurship, impact startups, women entrepreneurship, and sustainability. My today's guest is an unapologetic feminist, vegan, environmentalist, and a student of life. Having worked with SMEs, large corporations, startups, advisories, and more, she has been named as the top female entrepreneurs influencing sustainability in Asia in the year 2022. In 2021, she went on to win the UN Women for Leadership Commitment in SME category. Selected to be part of a fellowship along with 17 other global women who are working in the field of social entrepreneurship and development. She loves data. She's the ASEAN lead and mentors and guides chapters across ASEAN and India on their endeavor of enabling more women to enter the world of data and pursue career in the same. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so glad to invite today Aparna and welcome her to my podcast. Hi Aparna, welcome to Unbound.
Hi, Mamta. I'm really glad to be here and to speak with you.
And what a tall order of introduction. Yeah, I mean, आपकी जिंदगी में कितने घंटे हैं? I really want to know that. How do you get time to do all of this?
जितने भी हैं कम हैं actually और चाहिए.
So how did this whole thing start, Aparna? Where is the beginning? Where is the foundation? Did you sort of always knew that you're going to be ending up doing all of this, or how has it all started for you?
Looking back, I think I always wanted to do things. Somehow, I think at a fairly young age, I sort of figured out that I'd like to make a difference wherever I go. But I have to admit, I definitely hadn't imagined that the journey would be like this. I think I'm a seeker of challenges. I like doing things that I think give me a sense of excitement and give me the feeling that, okay, I made a difference, right? I made this place a bit better than what it was before and hopefully not, created a disaster.
So tell us, tell us about your beginning. Tell us about your background, your education, your family.
So I'm a child of a scientist and a banker, youngest of three, the only girl, and grew up in a green township of Anushakti Nagar in Mumbai. So, very academically inclined, while I have to admit I am average to above average. I can't say I was the topper during school. I did end up doing much better during engineering and MBA. But I think that exposure from a young age where I didn't see discrimination against my gender, in my family, especially my parents. And my father has been such a big champion of whatever I did and always been very supportive. So I think that built in me the drive that I can do whatever I want as long as, I am willing to accept the responsibility and the consequences associated with it. And also it was a very interesting upbringing because my mother was the busier one and we ended up spending, especially in the young age, more time with my father. So we started daycare as early as 2.5 years old. So we ended up being very independent kids, and spending time at daycare. And then in the evening, watching my parents cooking together, right? So I think gendered roles were never put forward. There was, sharing of duties. All of us learned how to cook. So my brothers and me too. And so each of us learned how to cook. My dad still is a better cook. He's the one who taught my mom, by the way. She's a convent educated single child. And when my father met her the first time, she very happily bragged, like, yeah, I can make a cup of coffee, which is basically, I think, making instant coffee. So, so I think seeing this complete breakdown of gendered roles gave that perspective that there's nothing that you cannot do, right? And it's more based on your capability rather than gender. So that being one. Secondly, because I grew up in a green township, the love for nature came. Despite being in Mumbai, we were exposed to beautiful, greenery and mountains surrounding. And I was part of a nature club at a very young age when I was 5, and we would go for nature walks and hikes. So I think that developed, and then going for camps. So I think that developed a love for nature.
Yeah, you know what this kind of also is helping me understand is that when you stay one with nature or up close with nature, how you are not so focused on yourself, because nature is such an overwhelming or such a wondrous experience. Otherwise, kids at home and probably in buildings and all, they're just wanting and craving to do something and not knowing what to do and trying to engage themselves. Nature in itself kind of takes that whole thing on your senses in such a way that it is so engulfing that you would find some pursuit, some reason, some engagement, and therefore obviously develop some kind of love as well. So very, very, very interesting start to begin with. So what did all of this lead to, really? I mean, you did not go into banking or finance. You did not end up being a scientist. So where did this lead to?
Yeah, so I think being the youngest, I also maybe had, interestingly, maybe a slight rebellious streak, though I think there was nothing ever imposed, but I think you could say the rebellious streak translated into a strong sense of independence. After seeing my eldest brother, leave for his college, and which was away from home, I think, decided pretty early that I wanted to study in a hostel, right? So I wanted to be away from home. And I received full support. So the interesting part is, Mamta, my father was like, yes, go for it. And in fact, it was some of my friends who were like wondering, yeah, but girls don't do mechanical. And I said, who said that?
Very interesting. So that makes me come to my next question. What has been that influence? Has there been some influence?
I think what led to my decision making is, of course, I think my dad had a role to play, my mom's independence, right, of pursuing or, her career. And then actually, I saw my brother tinkering around with like old radios and, watches, like he used to open up a Casio watch. I think that's what drove me to be curious about mechanical engineering. And then at home, my dad, not being the typical scientist, but I think a tinkerer, would make us work with them. So some people would call it child labor, but I think it was very interesting apprenticeship. But all three of us have actually been exposed to doing proper carpentry. I can drill an excellent hole in the wall. I can fix up tube lights. I can make racks, shelves. We've made furniture, and we've learned along the way. And I think so that sort of had in me the drive to do what I wanted to do, or I was curious about to a certain extent, as long as it was not harming anyone, right? So there is no need I have to follow somebody else's path if I'm not excited about it.
And your mom never intervened saying that, oh my God, what is this crazy thing going on? लड़कियां ये नहीं करती हैं या इसको ये क्यों करा रहे हो? She never sort of intervened and, did that whole thing.
No, not at all. Because as I said, my mom's also been different, right? She's an only child, brought up in a convent, and working women since the start, right? So basically nothing. Of course, she would worry that, okay, my kid is going far or whatever. So being the mom that she is, but I think that she did for every kid, right? It's not as if for the girl there was, I mean, of course there is a bit of worry, but it wasn't as if because she's a girl she cannot manage. In fact, I think they knew the way I was. They were a bit like, ye sambhal legi. Even though they did come to drop me. So both the times, even when I went for my MBA, they would always be there to see me off, right? So come and drop me off. But after that, I think somehow they had this level of trust that, she'll figure. And also, I think one interesting thing about our relationship has been me with my parents is I've had friends and, all shapes, sizes, and whatever. Is there was never a time my parents didn't know who my friends were. They would come to my home, they would know, they would have met them. So there was always this level of there's nothing to hide, right? There's nothing that I cannot do. And because we were independent, fairly early, I possibly got some independence more than my friends would have gotten at that age because yeah, parents can be protective. So I think that way I do consider myself really lucky because when I look back and I think that had that not been there, my I would have been different, right? So there's a concept of both nature and nurture, and then what I also believe is there's something that you take from that, right? So of course it could have been good or bad, but what I did with it is also what matters, right? Where I took my story also matters.
Interesting. So now you're based in Jakarta and you've lived and worked in more than 4 countries across Asia. What has been some of your biggest unlearnings? I mean, in terms of traditions, cultures, conditioning, things that you've been seeing in one set of culture, and you went with that thought to the other country, and all of a sudden you said, "Oh my God, this is something that I really need to let go." So, have there been those kind of moments?
Interestingly, yes. So I guess I will talk about first Singapore, which is, very different and developed and I think fairly individualistic country. So, and yeah, so when I first moved, right, in India, we have this culture of, whoever's the elder, the friend pays, etc. And not that I was expecting, but, right from the first day I moved, right, as a colleague who's just come in, but the first lunch itself is you're splitting. Okay, yours is this, yours is that. So yeah, it did caught me unaware. I was like, okay, I was thinking somebody would welcome me because we've done this, right? And so that was like the first shocker that sort of came in, and then it told me, okay, right here it's a bit different, right? So here people operate in this manner, and it was fine, and that didn't change the way I was. Yeah, so I continued to be the way I was because again, as long as I'm not harming anyone else, why should I give up on my values? Yeah, so I continued, but that was my first experience. And then also I think in terms of the whole vibe of the country, I mean, I look back to Singapore with a lot of love. It's a place where I've learned so much, I've done so many interesting mistakes and everything. But yeah, you can see a marked difference in terms of the cultural framework, right? It's and that was a very interesting experience. Also, the multicultural exposure I got in Singapore. It's literally a melting pot of so many cultures. It's just a country of say 5.5, but sizable percentage of those are expats who come and go, etc. Now it's I think crossed 6, and that then allowed me from being in India and okay, I was exposed to working with different nationalities because I was with an international MNC. But when I landed up in Singapore, literally from the moment I arrived, Mamta, my team had people from 25 nationality. They're just my team. So that just gave that wide exposure and perspectives of how a North Asian culture is different from Southeast Asian, from Oceania to South Asia to Middle East and Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. And it was such a great learning experience, right? Because not everyone you would get to meet, so you would have to learn to communicate with them through various media, say calls, conferences, emails, right? And that also taught me that emails can be such big tools of miscommunication, right?
Absolutely. So how would you juggle with all these sensibilities? I mean, did you really develop a another sense to pick these signals that okay, this is not gone down well with somebody who is an African vis-a-vis somebody who is from Middle East vis-a-vis from Southeast Asia. Like, so you would actually modulate your communication as per, I mean, looking into their backgrounds and nationalities.
Yeah, one would have to, and I think it also came with experience and also with some mistakes, right? So I wouldn't say like I got it right the first time. So of course there were colleagues who helped, and they would also tell you, okay, by the way, you're going to be interacting with the Japanese, so it's better that maybe you drop an email first because English can be an issue, right? They are not English speakers, so you need to make them feel comfortable, right? But Australians, it's best to just pick up the phone during working hours and have a call, things like that. So I think it came by learning by doing, taking feedback, also mistakes. Right now I don't remember, but yeah, definitely. And it was a very interesting experience. Like, I owe it to my time in Singapore to have, friends of like 20, 25 different nationalities too, right? Now in different parts of the world. And honestly, what it does is, Mamta, it makes you more humble. And we need to, stop getting hung up on stuff that, and also stereotyping that, Indians are like this or this one is like that. I mean, there is multi-layeredness to every individual, personality, people. So it definitely taught me that, right? And it taught me to, appreciate people for who they are, and also gave me the opportunity to share and actually address a lot of misconceptions about India, right? So I really look back to that, and I remember some of my colleagues still say that you were an ambassador, for India, because there are a few things I always used to do with some of my international colleagues and friends, because I'd take them to a temple and a gurudwara also to tell them, because Singapore had that, and then like an Indian lunch, which is not tikka masala, because that's what people think we have, and they don't know there's so much to Indian food. And then even our festivals. So I think what it did for me was it allowed me to share a bit more about my country, my culture, while allowing me to learn about theirs, and having that sense of appreciation and understanding that every individual and being is different. We don't always need to be the same, while there can be a sense of humanity that binds us, right? So so I, and which is why I think that has led me to essentially reach a stage where I don't believe in holding extreme views, right? There's no, you can't just say this is good and that is bad. There are perspectives to it. Yeah, of course, like murdering someone is bad, but then let me tell you, if that murderer is a rapist, what do you say? Like these kind of weird philosophical questions. And there was a point in time when friends asking me that would irritate me. I'd be like, what bullshit is this? But now I've realized that everything has perspective. There's not a single story, and we should stop getting hung up on it, right? So now my stance has become is, strong opinions loosely held, except for the fact that yes, I'm passionate about environment and we need to do take steps. And veganism, yes, because I'd like to minimize my negative impact, but it's not as if I'm going to judge the ones who are not.
At Unbound, we believe in the power of unhinged minds and untamed ideas of everyday people. As we sit to talk with some of them, we are listening to your voice too. So share your thoughts, ideas, and takeaways from this podcast as a review on Apple Podcasts, or just drop us a message on Instagram at d.mamta. And remember to follow and subscribe to this podcast to stay connected with us. And now, back to our Unbound conversation.
And I think also this whole thing as a humanity or collectively as humans, we tend to just take everything too personally, that if this is happening to me, this is just happening to me. How can this happen to me? So that whole, the drama behind anything that may come as a circumstance or an occurring, and you just take it just too personally and without even having a holistic perspective, or knowing the other side of the story, or knowing so many other stories that may be around. You just get so shut off, like you said, just get so stuck up with that thing. No, no, this is happening to me, this is my life, how can this happen to me? So that's very, very, very interesting, insight, indeed. And thanks for sharing that one, because that kind of opens up a lot of things for us, that okay, I mean, to be generalizing or stereotyping people, nationalities, cultures, so, and being surrounded or being in midst of a hodgepodge of it, and then trying to find your route and still put everything together, it's very challenging. Definitely, I'm sure this must have been quite a challenging period of your life as well. So I would just now quickly move to other questions, because we have many. And so some of the internal conflicts, that you've always faced while, so like you said, that you would take too much responsibility on yourself, something that has been a constant, kind of a criticism, or sort of a distraction, or you being your own detractor, putting yourself off from your focus. So are there things and conflicts that you have dealt with in life?
Definitely. So I think I have been my own best friend, but I've also been my worst critic and enemy. And one of the things I tend to do, only thing is I don't beat myself to death anymore, is I have strong imposter syndrome of, I don't know enough, right? Am I intelligent enough? Because I have two very intelligent parents. I have a brilliant nerdy eldest brother, right? So that conversation, definitely comes up. And then with time, and as you learn to see things the way they are. So I was very lucky to do Vipassana as part of my MBA when I was 22. And I am super grateful for that, right? Because it sort of reinforced in me some of the thinking I already had, but it sort of told that learn to take things the way they are, right? And nothing is permanent. It sounds super philosophical, but actually it's very simple, literal truth, right? Nothing is permanent. You'll be happy, you'll be sad, things will be shit, things will be great, and things will pass, right? The only absolute reality as we know it is death, and that also we know it as that because we don't know what happens after that, right? We don't have the science to figure that out. So I think that then told me to not be so hung up on things, and that did help. So what happens is then the turnaround period becomes faster, right? So I'll be very honest, even now, like, every day I'll have a moment where I'll be like, okay, shit, how dumb, Aparna, like, okay, get on with it, right? Okay, yes. And the way I counter it is by essentially pushing myself to keep on learning, improving. I call myself a student for life. And that has helped, right? So not getting hung up on, and there will be always people who will be better than me, right? More brilliant, more smarter, intelligent. Well, yes, you respect them, you learn something from them, but you're also better off than many others, right? So it just told me, right? And it happened over a period of time. And also, I think it happened because I sort of put myself in different places, right? Different challenges. And when you're in a place where you are in new space, new zone, etc., you adapt, right? So my adaptability, I think, is, fairly high. And I've gotten comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, no wonder why you would be able to do 4 countries in what, like 10 years, 15 years? How much time have you spent?
Less than 10. Less than 10.
Less than 10 years. Wow. So, it's like a continuous learning and then unlearning. And so interesting, very, very interesting. Now I have a volley of questions to ask, Aparna, and I want you to be really, really quick and fast in responding. Tell me, what have been some of your biggest challenges or fears that, you've faced and conquered on your way to live this kind of a life that you're living today?
Fear of failure, fear of trying to look good for others, right? And fear of being dumb. Yeah. And and all these, I think I have translated to achieve a level where literally I'm at a JOMO, like joy of missing out. So really I'm at a level where honestly I don't care about what is the latest show or whatever. If it does not work for me,
Now, give me these two acronyms again: JOMO and
so the opposite of JOMO is FOMO, which is fear of missing out. But I'm literally in JOMO state, joy of missing out. I really don't care. Something which I still have, by the way, quick one, is a fear of being dumb, right? Which can only be countered by constantly learning and being open to perspective. So that's what I'm working on.
Interesting. And how do you deal with social views and talkbacks? So, of course, there's this internal dialogue and internal fears and internal things that you're dealing with, and then there comes voila, something someone says or some criticism or some judgment that just gets imposed on you. How do you deal with that?
So I've not always been very good in dealing with it, right? Like not the perfect way to deal with it. But as I told you, I think since an early age, I realized that I don't just like following the masses, right? If it doesn't make sense. So that sort of built in me the understanding that not everyone is going to like you. Yeah. So moving away from the fact that trying to please everyone to reaching a level where not everyone is going to like you, and you will find your people. There are people who will appreciate you for being who you are. And a lot of times that has come to me, in retrospect, where people have reached out and said, hey, we used to admire you for this because you were your own this. And I was like, oh, interesting, because I never realized that. So essentially, it's come with that kind of reflection and building that self assurance. And one thing that I tend to do this exercise is I always do a bit of benchmarking with myself, saying, is there something I want in life which is not same as what is happening now, and which is a bit like maybe what my friends are experiencing or others? Because if I do realize I want that, then I have to work for it.
Yes. What are the things that you're biased towards in life? Are there things, peoples that you're biased towards?
Of course, I like, and again, that's something I have to also call myself out for, right? So I will, of course, like people who are independent, who are a bit different, who've also chosen different pathways in life. People, or I think places with, offbeat things to do or share, I tend to like, and run of the mill stuff actually bores me. But I think it can also be dangerous, right? Because you can't be always wanting to upset the apple cart. So which is where now I'm trying to be a little more conscious that yeah, I like these things, but that doesn't mean that the other is bad, right? And it's okay to have these periods of normalcy and lull, and I don't have to be crazy every day.
Yes, that's a very interesting point that you're bringing. While of course it's a good call out to all the eligible bachelors who are a bit weird and out of the ordinary league, please, you know what you have to do now. So some patterns which were absolutely impossible for you to break, but you had to break to be where you are today.
I think self criticism beyond a certain level, so I had to stop it, right? Because then you can't progress. And trying to be someone for everyone, right? So essentially choosing your tribe and being at peace with it, right? Because the ones who are meant to be with you irrespective of time, place, you'll find connections. Because I was at a stage where I would be like, no, I need to invest into the relationship and this friendship, that. But then I realized, no, it will happen, right? We will find a way across to each other. And let's not beat myself.
Interesting. So tell us a little more about this venture, Toraja Mello, right? Have I said this correctly?
You've pronounced it perfectly. I'm so impressed because people mess with the
Yeah.
name.
So tell me a little about it and little about your effort on uplifting the economic status of these weavers and reviving traditional motives. Where did this whole thing come from? From, warehousing, transportation, mentoring, all of that, and then now all of a sudden into sort of a sustainable fashion brand. Is that what you call it to
Yes,
be? Okay. So tell us a
yes,
little more
yeah.
about that.
Okay, so I can't take credit for founding it. It was founded by this lady, Dini Yusuf. Toraja Melo means beautiful Toraja in local Torajanese dialect. Toraja is a highland in south of Sulawesi in Indonesia. And the concept was born out of the need to prevent migration of local women outside, so emigration due to lack of local employment, and they would end up leaving and end up working as helpers or etc. in other countries. So to prevent that, this organization was formed, and she did this connection of women weaving, because most women in indigenous communities of Indonesia, and Indonesia has very rich indigenous heritage, are taught weaving as part of their sort of heritage. So therefore, connecting two to two, she said, if I give you employment and buy your weaving, will you stay? And they said, yes, if I don't have to step out of my home, and within my home and my community I can earn a decent living, I will not be forced to leave, because when they are forced to leave, the family breaks down too. So I think that's where it started, and then it connected with teaching them about quality, market, etc. And so that's how it's progressed. Since I took over in June 2020, we have sort of reinforced a very strong environmental angle. That's why this low ethical lifestyle brand has come in, because we can't just make waste. We have to ensure that we don't continue this linear economy, because there's no planet B, which means that right from this time, we source raw materials to production to everything, we are conscious, right? We minimize the negative impact. So the transition to using natural fibers and natural dyes, which they used to do, but they lost it due to urbanization and consumerism. So that's something that I'm bringing in. Then also making really high quality products such that they last long. So in fact, I know it sounds very stupid and counterproductive, but I'm literally telling you, as someone who's running a slow ethical lifestyle brand, that I want people to buy less, and don't buy if you don't need it. But when you buy right, use it for a longer period, let it last long, and then figure what to do with it.
I mean, you may be the first entrepreneur who would just say that please don't buy much or more, buy less. Very, very interesting. So how does this whole, this is again, now these are not the kind of thoughts and ideas which just come just like that. I mean, there is a lot behind it. Like how did you unfold this whole journey for yourself, that this is where you want to go, this is how you want to look at life, or this is how you want to preserve?
I think when you submit yourself to different perspectives, again, this is Paulo Coelho's book, The Alchemist, things fall into place, right? Universe conspires. And interestingly, right, I didn't raise my hands to lead Toraja Melo. Actually, the founder reached out. So I knew her. Once I moved to Singapore, I was helping her out, and she basically reached out and said, I would like you to lead it. Can you take over? Because I think you can take it to the next level. And I did take time to think, because I'd had two interestingly disastrous entrepreneurial adventures. So I was a bit like, okay, misadventures. So I was like, okay, Aparna, you want to do this again? Okay, you like crazy stuff, but yeah. So I did take my time to think, and I ended up doing another weird project in between. But then I think for me, it was sort of life coming full circle, because working on Toraja Melo, so I'm now in the driver's seat, right? So the success will also be mine to share with others, but also whatever challenges and failures I'll have will also something I own it. I think I had reached a level where I was like done listening to other people or being limited by my role, even though, you're part of so-called leadership, but not. So I think this just allowed me to say, okay, you're getting an opportunity to, or a challenge to shape this to something. So are you up for it? And I said, okay, let me try. And the thing I told myself was, and I continue to say, right, is If not now, then when? If not me, then who?
Wow, very simple but very powerful. So, coming back to the mantras of dealing failures and mistakes, like you said that you've had two misadventures. How do you rebound? Like, how do you just bounce back and say that okay, I'm not going to keep getting sucked into it. So, what's your mechanism? What's your mantra to go past failures?
Both of the times it did hit me hard, and as I told you, I'm someone who really takes it on herself, right? Because I will not blame situations, etc. It was my, errors of judgment or me trusting people too soon. So I think in both the times, I think I trusted people too soon. Um, I think with each of these, the bounce back time became faster, right? First time, of course, because I left a fairly successful career in Singapore to become an entrepreneur and didn't go. And with a friend who obviously didn't remain a friend, right? I was literally threatened to leave the country. Yeah. So, so it did tell me, like, how stupid can you be? But then I think I also saw it from other perspective that I've learned something. I've learned how not to be, and I've learned to gauge. And I actually had a pretty quick decision time in both these where I didn't linger. See, I could have lingered and gone against my values and sort of, blamed myself, by, sucking up. But I did realize that no, I think time out. And so I think there was a bit of course, wallowing, but then, it switched on to look at the other perspective. I learned something. Now I know what not to do, how not to do it, and, try new things. And I think that has sort of helped me become wiser and definitely smarter, right?
Interesting. So, what keeps your fire burning, Aparna? What makes you just wake up in the morning and say that, okay, I got to get going. I got to get going. This is not where I'm stopping. So, how do you keep it alive?
Well, I'm alive and there's lots to be done. I think that's what I do. If I wake up means I'm alive and there's lots to be done. So, I guess get on with it. So, for me, it's a bit like suck it up and move on. Yeah.
That was as brief as it can be. Great. So that just brings us to almost at the end of the episode, but we do have some very interesting, like a fireside chat or a rapid reflex round is what I call it. You've got no time to think and you need to answer these quick questions, just maybe in a word or two maximum. So are you ready? Do you want to take some deep breaths?
I'm ready to go.
All right. One thing you would like to change about our education system.
Less instructional, more critical thinking.
Okay. One thing you wish parents never said to children.
Live your life this way.
One thing you wish you knew at the age of 20.
At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter.
One thing you wish never existed in this world.
Male chauvinist pigs.
All right. So one thing you wish which could exist forever.
Women being in the center of every kind of decision making all across the world.
Excellent. And one thing you would certainly like to unlearn.
Having too many biases and, stuck up views. Honestly, doesn't matter. Nobody cares.
So now you got to just complete the sentence. Fun to you is?
A nice conversation and a good book.
Love to you is?
Giving without expecting anything in return.
Oh, life to you is?
Worth living and not worth overthinking.
Food to you is?
Vegan and has to be tasty.
Sustainability to you is?
A way of life.
And finally, our planet Earth to you is?
The best thing that could ever happen to humans.
Oh, wow. This was truly being unbound, Aparna. Truly. I mean, I do have one more segment, which is just about pick or choose. So pick your choose, universe or metaverse?
Universe.
Preserve or conserve?
Preserve.
Impact or purpose?
Oh, damn. That's tough. Purpose.
Dreams or actions?
Actions.
Data or analysis?
Data.
That makes you, Aparna, that really, really makes you truly unbound. And I'm totally inspired, impressed. And this brings us to the fag end of the show, and it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here, uncover such interesting aspects of you, your life. I mean, just keep up the great work, girl. Keep inspiring, leading, changing, and repeating. I am 100% sure that you will continue to find the ways it can. Thanks for sharing your journey with us.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I would love to know from you what idea or insight you unboxed from today's conversation. Just drop me a message over LinkedIn or in my inbox, and remember to follow this podcast so that when the next episode drops, you can join me for yet another one too. Keep coming and keep unbounding. Till then, this is your host Mamta signing off.